There's a quiet thought many people carry, a thought they rarely say out loud, the feeling that somehow they're already behind in life, behind their friends, behind their generation, behind some invisible schedule they never agreed to follow. And the strange thing is, almost everyone feels this way, even the people who seem far ahead. You open your phone, someone just bought a house. Someone else started a company. Another person is traveling the world. Someone announces a promotion, someone shares a wedding photo, someone posts a milestone you hadn't even thought about yet. And slowly, a quiet question begins forming in the back of your mind. What am I doing with my life? At first, it's just a passing thought, but over time it returns more often. Not as a loud panic, but as a quiet pressure that slowly grows in the background of your life. Through photos, through small updates, through harmless-looking posts that slowly accumulate. Until one day, you realize something uncomfortable. You're no longer just observing other people's lives, you're measuring your life against them. And without even realizing it, you begin to believe you're falling behind. But here's the strange part. That feeling usually doesn't come from reality. It comes from something far more subtle. Something invisible that quietly shapes how we see our progress, an invisible timeline. Somewhere along the way, most of us absorb a silent script about how life is supposed to unfold. By this age, you should have your direction. By that age, you should have stability. By another age, you should already be successful. Graduate, build a career, achieve milestones, secure your future. And when life doesn't follow that exact order, it creates a strange emotional friction, a quiet sense that something must be wrong. But the truth is, this timeline is mostly imagined. For most of human history, people rarely compared their lives with thousands of others. They compared themselves with maybe 10 or 20 people around them, their neighbors, their family, their small community. Today, we compare ourselves with millions. Every scroll introduces someone younger doing something impressive, someone richer, someone happier, someone more accomplished. And because the human brain is naturally wired to notice status and progress, those comparisons slowly accumulate in the background of our thinking. But what we rarely see is the full story. We don't see the debt behind the success, the burnout behind the productivity, the loneliness behind the perfect photos, the anxiety behind the smiling achievements. What we're actually seeing is a carefully edited illusion of progress, a highlight reel of moments that make life look perfectly timed and perfectly organized. And when we compare our complicated reality to someone else's curated moments, feeling behind becomes almost inevitable. If this idea resonates with you, pause for a moment and let me know in the comments. Have you ever felt like life is quietly moving ahead without you? Sometimes simply realizing that others feel the same way can change how we see our own timeline. Human lives rarely follow clean timelines. Some people succeed early and spend years trying to rediscover meaning later. Others struggle quietly for decades before suddenly finding their path. There are people who start over at 40, people who discover purpose at 50, and people who completely reinvent themselves at 60. But those stories rarely dominate headlines. The world loves early success, the prodigy, the overnight breakthrough, the 25-year-old founder. Late transformation is quieter. It doesn't trend on social media, but it happens far more often than we realize. History is filled with people who once believed they were behind. Writers who didn't publish until their 40s, entrepreneurs who started companies in midlife, artists who spent decades experimenting before finally discovering their voice. And when we look back at their lives today, we rarely think of them as late. We see them as exactly where they needed to be. Because life rarely unfolds according to a universal clock. It unfolds through experience, through mistakes, through wrong turns, through years that feel confusing while they're happening, but make sense much later. The path only becomes clear in hindsight. The real danger isn't actually being behind. The real danger is believing you are, because that belief quietly reshapes how you see yourself. Curiosity turns into pressure. Exploration turns into anxiety. Growth becomes something that feels urgent instead of meaningful. Instead of asking what kind of life you want to build, you begin asking whether it's already too late. And that single question can quietly shrink the possibilities of your future. But something interesting happens when people step outside this invisible race. They begin to notice something simple. Life isn't actually a race at all. It's closer to a landscape. Some people climb mountains early. Some wander through valleys for years before discovering their direction. Some take long detours that eventually lead somewhere meaningful. But every path still counts as movement, still counts as experience, still counts as life unfolding. The problem was never that you were behind. The problem was believing everyone else was ahead. And once that belief begins to fade, something surprisingly calm begins to replace it. You stop chasing milestones that were never truly yours. You stop measuring your life through other people's timelines. And slowly, life begins to feel different. Less like a race you're losing, and more like a path you're finally allowed to explore, at your own pace. But that raises an even deeper question. If life isn't supposed to be a race, why does modern life make it feel like one?